Okay, I guess we can get started. All right. So good afternoon, class. My name's Ron Howell. This course is on secondary clarifier operation and loading rate, specifically surface overflow rate. The object of the lesson is to describe the operation of a secondary clarifier and to calculate hydraulic loading rates for a secondary clarifier. To start off with, I'd like to do an icebreaker. So what I'd like you guys to do is I'd like you to state your first name, how many years you've worked in wastewater treatment, and where you'd like to see yourself in 5 years' time. And I'll go first. I'm Ron. I've worked in wastewater treatment for 28 years, and in 5 years I'd like to be teaching in some capacity. So, next.
My name is Andrew Hunt. I've been in Metro Vancouver for over around 25 years. Coming up on 8.5 at this place. And in 5 years, I'll be a lot closer to retirement.
Good goal.
My name is Martin Gnose. I have been with Iona for 8.5 years, and I will see myself retiring hopefully in 5 years.
My name is Cam Lupian, operator 3. I've been with Metro Vancouver for 25 years. 5 years I probably is in a place here to get close to retirement. Status quo.
Ted Veenstra, maintenance supervisor. I've been maintaining wastewater treatment plants for 17 years. In 5 years, I would like to move into a position such as my excellent assistant superintendent Martin, or a similar type of position.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to do a little pre-assessment here. Using a show of hands, how many students have worked in a plant with secondary clarifiers? And has anyone calculated a surface overflow rate in a clarifier? And I'd like to ask, why do you think that might be important if you've done that?
So you don't overload it because they have to work within certain parameters of loading?
Good answer. So, I'm going to, sorry, I didn't set this up. I wanted, whoops. Excuse me for a second here, I have to, before I get started, I'm going to show just the first part of this video. And what it does is it explains the operation of a secondary clarifier. And it also identifies a lot of the parts of a clarifier. The rest of the video talks about state point analysis, which is beyond the scope of this course. It's basically state point analysis takes the surface overflow rate and the solids loading rate, and you have to do some special sampling to plot an SVI, and you find out where your SVIs, which basically tells how well your sludge is settling. And in the state point analysis, you have you find where the two lines intersect, and as long as they're within the SVI curve, the clarifier should work properly. If it's outside of the curve, you're overloading it either hydraulically or with solids.
The purpose of this video is to help you better understand the function of a clarifier and start you on your path towards effective clarifier operation. The purpose of a wastewater treatment clarifier is to slow the water down enough such that suspended particles can be separated out by the force of gravity. Mixed liquor, typically from aeration tanks, enters through a centrally located feed pipe. From there, the flow has two ways out. First, settled sludge leaves through another centrally located pipe at the bottom of the clarifier and is recycled back into the system or wasted. This is the underflow. The second way is over the overflow weir. In a properly functioning clarifier, overflow water should look very clear. Finally, grease, oil, and other floating material is removed by a skimmer on the surface. Without going into too much detail, some other important components of a circular clarifier include the rake arms, an energy dissipating inlet, the drive mechanism, a feed well, and a density current baffle. To review, particles, represented by our bug here, enter the clarifier suspended in the water. As they enter the clarifier, energy is effectively dissipated, allowing the bug, which is more dense than water, to slowly sink, while the water eventually makes its way to the top of the tank and over the weir. Pretty simple, right? Well, a lot of work goes into making sure that a clarifier functions correctly.
And that's where we'll stop this. This is the curve I was talking about, the SVI curve. This is the hydraulic loading rate. This is the solids loading rate. You know, with this image, this says that this clarifier is being loaded within its parameters. So we're going to move on to just showing some of the parts of a clarifier. Most clarifiers that I've worked with have an upflow tube in the center of the clarifier. It will discharge into this, they call it an energy dissipating inlet, top or whatever. And then the ring outside of that is a flocculation well. They're calling this a suction header, so this obviously is hooked up to a pump, and the sludge is withdrawn using a pump suction header. Let's see. This type of clarifier uses a beach plate with a small skimmer. There typically would be a trough and a sump that would discharge into. And in a lot of secondary treatment plants, that would be sent to a DAF unit, dissolved air flotation. Obviously, most clarifiers have a catwalk, graded walkway, as they call it here. The drive motor, there's a scum baffle here. It doesn't show it very well, but you can see there's a V-notched weir, and the scum baffle just contains any pin flock or possibly minor bulking sludge. And this trough here, just like we have on our thickeners, is a effluent launder. Oops. So I just wanted to, I worked at this plant for 20 years, and this is kind of the way the plant was when I left it. This is the headworks area here. And like so many wastewater treatment plants, the designers decide to put the admin building right next to the headworks, which is probably the worst area for odors in a lot of treatment plants. 2002, We had a new admin building, lab, really well-designed change rooms with a clean, dirty side, so you could, take your street clothes off, hit a shower, or vice versa kind of thing. These lagoons were aerated when I showed up at the plant. They still had mechanical aerators, which basically look like a really large pump impeller, and they basically pull air in as they mix the wastewater. So fortunately, these lagoons were tied into the overflow at the headworks. So if we ever had a hydro loss or really high flows, it would overflow here. These tubes here are Archimedes screw pumps, and that's what we used for lift pumps in this particular plant. So there was an overflow channel that went to the lagoons, and then they were all tied together. If we had these things empty, we actually had about 2 days flow capacity. So, for extreme rain events and power outages, it was a real lifesaver. We had circular primary clarifiers. So they're basically very similar to a thickener, work the same. At this point, these were bioreactors. They originally had mechanical aerators on them, and then we eventually got diffused air with blowers. This building here housed the blowers. And these tanks were reconfigured to do biological nutrient removal. This is where our incomer came. 2 transformers out here, 25 kV. And this train here, this primary clarifier, bioreactor, and these 2 secondary clarifiers were built in '73. And this train here, 2 primary clarifiers, larger aerator bioreactor, and 4 secondary clarifiers were built in '83. A lot of plants, at least in Alberta, in the early '80s were upgraded, and I think the economy had taken a nosedive, and the government was trying to keep the economy going, so a lot of plants were expanded. Plus, Alberta had quite a growth rate in the '70s due to the oil sands and all the oil that was going on. In the 2000s, these 2 were 2 gravity thickeners, but they were used for thickening secondary sludge. And the primaries, like these, we actually thickened in these primaries. So the primary sludge was pumped directly out of these tanks to these 4 digesters. 3 of them were primary, 1 was a secondary. These were converted into primary sludge thickeners. So we would pump primary sludge at a 1% over the fermenters and try to have a 5-day solids retention time, and that would, like what we battle here at Iona with soluble BOD, we wanted to do that because that enhances the biological phosphorus removal in a BNR plant. And this building here housed the DAF units, the dissolved air flotation, which took the place of these gravity thickeners. And like Iona, Red Deer had digested sludge lagoons. And this here, I believe, was our supernatant cell. So we would siphon out of the, once the sludge settled out, we would siphon into a supernatant cell and then pump that back to the headworks of the plant, typically at low flows. So this is a picture of one of the 73 clarifiers. Now this is considered an inboard launder because it's inside the sidewall of the clarifier. It's kind of a hexagon shape, so it doesn't really, unless you put a circular scum baffle around it, you can't put a skimmer arm on there. Lots of algae growth. We had to do a lot of work to keep those clean. Here's another shot. I believe this might be the other clarifier because at this time we already had construction going on. This was the MCC building for the big plant where the incomers came. We had a really small flocculation well. Yeah, that's about it. This is a picture of one of the 1983 secondary clarifiers. Again, it had a small flocculation well. This one did have a skimmer arm. This was an outboard launder, so the launder actually was outside the sidewall of the clarifier. The new clarifiers at Langley also have, not this design, but they have outboard launders. And then when we had an upgrade, started around 2007, they took out all the internals of the clarifier and put these in. Now this changed to a pumped suction header in these clarifiers. It had a much bigger flocculation well. This is the energy dissipating inlet here with these little doors that try to slow down the velocity of the mixed liquor. And here's another picture of one of these retrofitted clarifiers that's empty. So you've got the flocculation well really deep, deeper than the original design. A lot wider beach plate for the scum removal. And I would like to have seen how these work. Like we battled, you know, Red Deer can get down to 40 below, and when it gets minus 30, minus 40, you can get ice buildup on here. Particularly if you have like any kind of solids, foam is really bad. It'll ice up, and then eventually, you know, the skimmer arm will get caught on it, and potentially you could break a shear pin. And I have changed shear pins in 30 below at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's not very much fun. These things here, I don't know. Is anybody familiar with this component here?
So assuming it keeps the flock from coming up over the weir.
If you've seen a lot of secondary clarifiers and you get any kind of bulking sludge, you typically see it on the outside walls of the clarifier. You know, the way that the mixed liquor comes up the center column, goes out that energy tub into the flocculation well, and it forces the currents down. And the idea is that the currents will go down, you know, possibly, maybe not to the floor of the clarifier, but then they'll deflect off the floor and come up the side and then over the overflow weir. When these were being installed, they were a patented design, and we knew them as Stamford baffles, but I know there's other people that are building this sort of thing. And it just helps, like especially when you have an outboard launder. With the inboard launders like at Anasis and Lulu, you don't get as much of that kind of thing happening. One thing I wanted to show, I drew a little very crude diagram here. Pardon my artwork. But you know, most of our clarifiers now use a suction header. We pump it. That gives us better control. Like, you know, we can, if we want to return our sludge at 45%, you know, we can actually use VFD and maintain that, which gives us better control. The clarifiers in Red Deer originally had gravity sludge removal. So basically how that worked, on the old clarifiers they had three tubes that went down very close to the floor of the clarifier, and the newer ones had 5 tubes. And there was they had kind of a V skimmer that would sort of, you know, help draw that sludge to the tube. And if this is the launder, let's assume that's the surface level of the water overflowing. Well, the top of the tubes from these the sludge removal were roughly about a foot lower than the overflow weir. So gravity would naturally force that sludge to come up. It actually worked pretty well, but there again, you know, not necessarily the best control. Just another shot of the energy dissipating inlet tub, flocculation well. Here's a picture of one of the Anasis clarifiers. Anasis has 12 of these clarifiers. They're getting 6 more, I believe. And they have a 7,288 meter cubed volume. They have inboard launders. They do have a scum baffle here. And they have a scum trough with a scraper blade, usually underneath the catwalk. So when the arm goes by, the rubber scraper pulls the scum into there, and the pump comes on periodically to pump it away. Another shot of an Anasis clarifier. This is the scum trough here. It usually has the water level is very close to the top of it, but you know when the pumps come on, it does pump that away. Obviously, lots of algae growing there. We don't remove any nutrients at Metro Vancouver, well, other than Langley, I suppose, nitrifies. But when you don't remove nutrients, you have lots of ammonia, and you have lots of phosphorus, and you have probably every other nutrient in the book. And when you have that and you add sunlight, you get lots of algae. Here's one of the new Langley clarifiers. Pardon me. I don't have my, oh, here it is. These clarifiers, 2,970 meters cubed. To put that into MLD, that would be a 2.97 million liter tank. Apparently when they first built these, they didn't put a scum baffle in. And the designer's idea was just let it go out with the river. But they found, you know, what happens with these clarifiers, or at least a theory, is that when the mixed liquor comes up, if it's operating close to its capacity, there will be really good currents, and it should pull the solids down the flocculation well. But I believe if they're underloaded, you're not generating those currents. And they had issues with foam and solids going over and not happy. Outboard launder, a single weir. Sorry. And this is just a shot of the flocculation well at Langley. I'm not sure if they raised these, but it was my understanding that they actually were submerged, and which would allow the pin flock and foam and all that kind of thing to leave. And then we get to Lulu. Lulu's clarifiers are 4.2 million liter capacity. That's in volume, not in flow necessarily. They have inboard launders, a double weir with square notch, and they also have a scum baffle. These launders are also a type of hexagon, but they've put a circular scum baffle in here to try to keep any solids from going out with the effluent. Another shot. Here's the scum trough of one of the Langley clarifiers, and it'll be rotating this way. There'll be a scraper blade, rubber scraper blade. Again, the scum baffle, double weir launder. They tend to, Lulu, they tend to get a lot of this kind of white foam. I don't think it's an issue or whatever. Lulu's plant works very well, typically puts out, effluent of 5-6 milligrams per liter, so very, very stable plant. And then before we get into our calculators, I just wanted to show you what a secondary clarifier sounds like and looks like, just to kind of give us all a nice serene feeling. So that brings us to our calculation. So we're going to talk about surface overflow rate. The formula for surface overflow rate is meters cubed over meters square of surface area of a clarifier per day. So the flow is the gives you your volume, and the surface area of the clarifier gives you your meter squared. And I want to pass these around. You guys take a look at these. These are design data for Anisys and Lulu. These are a great resource when you're, you know, trying to figure out capacities and whatnot. Unfortunately, Iona doesn't have this. I guess it was that kind of came with the when those plants, right? Sorry, get dry mouth here. So, without further ado, please take one and pass them around. Can I have one? So if you look at this sheet, I pulled all of this design data out of one of these design data reports. So Lulu has 4 secondary clarifiers. They have a 31.2 meter diameter. They have a 5.5 meter sidewall depth. The surface area of the tank is 765 meters squared. And Lulu's overflow rate, the designers determined that the average dry weather flow loading hydraulically to that clarifier would be 29.1 meters cubed per meter squared. The maximum monthly flow would be 34.2, and the peak wet weather flow would be 59.6. And you definitely want to operate within the average dry weather flow. You can take a hit, you know, from time to time, but you sure wouldn't want to operate like that on a continuous basis. And looking at the 2016 annual report, I pulled it actually is 70 million liters per day. So this, again, this is the overflow rates for Lulu. So now what we want to do is we want to calculate the overflow rate per clarifier. So the surface area per clarifier is 765, and the design rating is 29.2. So basically we multiply the two, and that gives us the capacity of one clarifier. So if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and see what you come up with. Meters cubed.
Yes.
Yeah. So for the next, so anybody want to say it again?
22,338.
Anybody got anything different? Eugene?
No.
Good? Darren? All good? What about you, Cam?
Yep, same.
So we came up with the meters cubed, but in order to do the next question, we want to convert that to million liters per day. So 22,338 meters cubed. To convert cubic meters into million liters per day, you divide it by 1,000. So basically you end up with 22.34 million liters per day. Are we all good? So now let's talk about the minimum number of secondary clarifiers needed at Lulu based on their average dry weather flow. So what we want to do is we know that the average daily flow for 2016 was 70 MLD, and we know that each clarifier has a capacity of 22.34 million liters per day. So basically, we divide 70 MLD by 22.34 MLD, and let me know what you come up with.
So 3.125, Ron.
Anyone else?
That's 3.1333932.
That's pretty close.
You didn't round up your first number as directed by the teacher.
Using that key figures.
I just want to say
What'd you guys get? Darren?
31.13.
Same with you, Andrew? All right. So I did round up. I went to 2 digits. I did this in Excel, so sometimes Excel rounds, does funny things at times. So basically, for average dry weather flow at Lulu, they need 3.13 clarifiers. They could probably get away with 3 clarifiers because, you know, when engineers design these, typically when they design these processes, they build in a safety factor. And if it's designed properly and operated properly, it should work beyond its firm capacity, as they say. How are we doing so far? So let's move to analysis. Andrew, you mind taking one and passing it on? So again, same formula, surface overflow rate, meters cubed into meters squared per day. Flow is meters squared, or meters cubed, and the surface area is measured in meters squared. Analysis has 12 secondary clarifiers, and each clarifier has a 1,257 meters squared surface area, 5.88 meters sidewall depth, and they're 40 meter diameter clarifiers. So these clarifiers are slightly deeper than Lulu. And the hydraulic loading rates for Anasis are slightly higher. What was it, 29.1 for Lulu? And I would assume that the reason that it has a higher capacity is because it has that extra depth. Anasis is maximum monthly flow, 51.2, and the peak wet weather flow, 64.1. So let's calculate the overflow rate for an Anasis clarifier. Surface area by design rating, and see what you get for clarifier capacity at Anasis. What's the clarifier capacity?
Oh, it's 4.3 million liters per day. 40.3.
Everybody agree? $40.349.7 or rounded up for MLD, 40.35 MLD, million liters per day. So we want to know what's the minimum number of secondary clarifiers required at Anasis based on their average dry weather flow. And this is based on the 2016 average dry weather flow, which when I looked at the past 5 years for Anasis, it's actually come down. So water restrictions, possibly?
Low flush toilets. Martin, does
So
it
the
show
average
up?
daily flow is 407. I think when I came here in 2009, I think their average dry weather flow was closer to 425, upwards around there. So I was quite surprised to see this, but maybe they fixed some of the pipes or... So how many clarifiers do we need to treat that flow? Anybody?
Yeah.
10. How do you do a decimal point?
There's no just,
You can't put a portion
well,
of
10.08.
service. So if it's over 10.
10.08 clarifiers, yeah, you know, I do 2 decimals in Excel. But essentially 10 clarifiers at Anasis would be enough to treat their flow. It's really important, you know, the fact that they have 12 clarifiers, you wouldn't want to take more than 2 out at any time for maintenance or whatever. So that's kind of where this stuff is kind of important. Everybody get that? So that brings me to the end of the lesson. As usual, everybody's favorite part of the course is filling out a training evaluation form. So please take one, pass it along. I will try to submit this. I am in the process of trying to get it submitted for CEUs. So,
I have a question for you.
okay.
Does that clarifier load, does that depend on the solids that you're influent? Like if you have,
It has, yes, but it has more to do with the sol, like in Lulu and Annis, it has more to do with the solids coming out of the solids contact tanks.
because I'm saying in the case of a storm flow through Iona, you're pumping more water than anything else. That's
Right,
very
right.
As far as sewage goes.
The storm flows that we have at Iona would be terrible for some, you know, if we can't control that somehow or bypass it some way, that could wash out clarifiers, which you could lose, you know, a significant amount of your biomass. City of Edmonton has, you know, a treatment plant slightly smaller than the Anasis plant. And what they did, they have some combined sewer, a lot of combined sewers in the downtown area. So when they don't get the rain, obviously, that Vancouver gets, but when they do get a significant rainfall, it can overload their secondary treatment capacity. And what they've done to mitigate that is they have built a CEPT primary where if their flows exceed, I believe it's 800 MLD, they could bypass it to a primary clarifier with, I believe it's lamella plate settlers. And they also, just like we do, they add polymer and alum. And then it goes, that flow still goes through UV. And, you know, of course, there's going to be a lot of dilution, right? So, you know, in storm flows, they likely will meet their permit. Edmonton puts out, last time I was there, they put out about a 3 milligram per liter effluent out of that plant, as well as doing, you know, nitrogen and phosphorus removal. So, yeah, well run plant.
Could you give your title, sorry?
It's this SCO and HL. Change the title.
And I'd like to thank you guys for attending. This really helps me out a lot. I've got a deadline of March 31st, so I got a couple of maybe not sound like a big deal, but a couple thousand word reports that I got to write. So